Okay, good morning, everybody. Declan Kearney's my name. I've been with this public policy advisor network since it was set up, and this is the second time we've had our conference. And as I was preparing for this talk this morning, I was reminded of an article I read in the Sunday Times reviewing a book by Jeremy Paxman, his biography, A Life in Questions. And he quotes a story he tells about John Major meeting Boris Yeltsin of Russia some years ago. And John Major apparently said to Boris, in a word, Boris, how are things in Russia? And Boris says, good. And Major says, in more than a word, Boris, how are things in Russia? Not good. And as I was looking at public sector reform and new politics, I was struck by the fact that you could actually, if you asked Robert Watt in Deeper, how are things in public sector reform, Robert? Good. Care to elaborate? Well, not good. And similarly with Andy Kearney about new politics, good and not good. And you'll see that when I give you some of the information that in fact there are some very good things happening, but there are also some questions and some possible things that we're missing in public sector reform that could make a difference. So the sort of thing we're going to look at are the key themes of the public sector reform in 2016. I haven't taken everything. I'm looking at the key themes. So what's happening in the public sector? What are the key things that are changing? Is it good? Is it not so good? Well, you'll see that. In fact, that there are more good, I think, than not good in the key themes. There are recurring challenges in the system, but I think to put it in a nutshell, there's a battle between Deeper and the rest of the system. You know, Deeper is trying to make change happen. The rest of the system is resisting as hard as it can. But I think if you look at what Deeper are doing, they're setting the framework and the ground for change to actually happen. So I think there's a if you like to see it as a battle, I think Deeper are winning. They may not have been some years ago, but I think Deeper are winning now. I want to talk a bit about the context and really talk about what the public now are saying about the system. And in fact, we're not alone. The rest of Europe have difficulties with this populism, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And talk about some of the issues that's actually raised in terms of what does citizenship mean, and what does it mean to actually live in Ireland, and how do our people actually interact with the system. And I'm going to suggest a wider role for public servants, and I'm going to talk about a very interesting pilot study in Galway of what I call a jury, a citizens' jury looking at public administration and advising public administration and how it should change. And we have the director of that pilot study with us today, so he may want to talk about it later. Evan Grace is here. And I'm actually suggesting that there may well be a wider role for public servants to play in the current environment. So, the key themes, well, there were 6 or 7 of them. The main one is that the civil service had the first staff engagement survey. It was reported on earlier this year. It was held in 2015, and it has some good and some not some good things. There's some movement on performance management, new disciplinary procedures, focus on leadership, town hall consultations, and the action plans of Deeper are being ticked off in terms of the things they're achieving. I'll come back to some of these things in a few minutes, but to go on with the civil service staff engagement survey. Sorry, I'm pressing my buttons wrong. On the good side, in terms of the civil service, but in fact I've looked at staff service in the health service and other parts of the public service, and in fact they're quite similar. The findings are quite similar. So you'll find that what the civil service are saying is that 80% of civil servants feel they're competent, they have the skills and abilities to do the job. 75% are happy with their well-being. In other words, they're connected to the system and there's energy to do the job. 70% feel engaged. 70% have social support. So in other words, there's good relationship building in government departments and there's a support for actually doing your work. And 69% say they're good at coping with change. Now, this is self-answering questionnaire, so we all know that we tend sometimes to be a little bit more positive about ourselves than perhaps it's the truth, but generally this is the feeling that civil servants are not too bad in these areas. In terms of what's not so good, public perception, the civil service feel that they are perceived pretty badly by the public. In other words, 33% of them are saying we have a good view, or we have a good value, we're valued by the public. They're not seen as something very positive. 36% feel they're involved in decision making, so there's something about staff not being consulted or not being involved in decisions. 42% are happy with their pay and how it compares with others. Pay, huge issue for the future. Organisational support, only 44% think that the organisation actually values them and sees any worth in their work. And career development and mobility, only 44% think that that's actually positive. Now, bear in mind, this was done in 2015, so we're talking about a system under pressure. 20% cut in salaries, 10% cut in numbers, increased hours, lots of pressure on the system to get out of Troika, to deal with the crisis. So generally you'll find, particularly in the next slide, when you see that the worrying responses, you'll see this is a system under pressure. So only 12% agree that poor performance is addressed effectively, 28% agree that performance is measured, 33% say that the department searches for new ways to deal with problems, so innovation is an issue. 33% agree, 35% that senior managers have a clear vision for the future of the department. 36% confident decisions made by senior management. See, this is pretty negative stuff. 39% agree the department is managed well, and 42% agree that work utilises their full abilities. So I think this is a measure of the fact that the system is under extreme pressure, that it's actually short-termism, that it's doing a lot of things, but they're short-term. It's getting the job done, it's getting the basics done, but in terms of the long-term, in terms of a vision, in terms of concentrating on leadership and those types of things, basically that's not on the agenda. Getting the job done is what it's all about, and some of the other things here have suffered because of that. Just to go back to the overall themes, so the survey was last year, and the next few headings are what's being done this year about actually making things different. So there is a new performance management system in the civil service. It includes 360-degree feedback for senior managers. This is the first. And there's a focus on promoting performance discussions. If you remember, last year I talked about the performance management system, and in fact there's been a lot written about the old performance management system, that it was a grading system with 5 grades and you had to put people into a box, and that the whole emphasis was on what box do you fit into. No real discussion on performance. Deeper have listened to criticisms of the system and have changed it. There's only 2 categories now. You've either done the job or you haven't. Very simple. And they're promoting discussions with people. So actually, let's discuss performance. Like in Scotland. In Scotland, every civil servant is required to meet with their manager once a month, and there's 5 questions. What did you achieve last month? What did you learn? What sort of issues have you got? How can I help? And what are you doing next month? Very simple. There's no ratings. It's discussion about performance. And that's where this system is heading. And the 360-degree feedback for senior managers is actually dealing with those issues about getting people involved, about leadership, about talking to people, about communication. So there's an element of deeper setting down the foundation for good management. And this is the sort of thing that happens in the private sector, has happened a long time in the private sector, this 360-degree feedback. And in fact, with this staff survey, actually there's a chance now of a rating system that some government departments will be able to see, well, actually we're top of the pile here, and others will say, well, we're at the bottom, and what are we going to do about it? So there's a foundation being set now for better management. Every year the survey will be done, every year departments will be comparing with each other, and there's now a pressure from the centre by providing this service-wide information for managers to actually do something. And that even can feed into mobility programs, career development programs. You want to learn about X, this is the place where it's done best, and you can transfer people in there. So the foundations are being set for a whole new way of working, because it's evidence-based. and it's being reviewed all the time. This is very new. So this is what I think is good. Okay, time will tell, will it work? But I have a feeling that this notion of the staff engagement survey, where people say, oh yeah, isn't it great having the staff? Yeah, they have a survey, super. Actually, it is super. Simply because it will be used every year and compared with the year before, and people will be forced to do something about it. The next one, the new disciplinary procedures with a strong focus on managing poor performance. Again, excellent. Sunday Times yesterday had a little piece about this. The old disciplinary and performance system in the civil service is extremely cumbersome, very difficult to do anything. People could actually opt out and it's difficult to get them involved in it. There's a whole new system agreed with the unions coming into operation 1st of January, very, very slick, and it will be able to deal with poor performance much more effectively than the old system. That's not to say it's easy. I mean, I've been involved in disciplinary procedures, both the public sector and the private sector, and in both sectors it's very difficult to deal with poor performance. Very difficult to actually get somebody out of the system. But the civil service is now working, the actual policies are there and procedures are there. And only Friday in the Irish Times there was an ad for HR managers in the civil service. So they're recognising that there's a need to bring in expertise from outside to actually improve this whole area. So there's a huge, I think, possibility of all these changes making a significant difference. There's a focus on leadership development across the public service. Coaching, I think of the 200 and odd senior people in the senior public service, I think over 50% of them now have a coach. So they're being coached. There's coaching for top teams as well, so there's team coaching being done. So really big change, and this works. I can remember working with somebody who got 360-degree feedback. I was coaching a senior manager, and he got this feedback. And the feedback was what would be appropriate for a general in Iraq. And when this was a firefighting guy banged the table, you can't do it, gives me, I'll do it myself. And I remember saying to him, what do you think of this feedback, Tony? He says, yeah, that's me. That's what I always get. And I said, well, hold on a minute. You're supposed to change, you know. If you got this before, like, it's not the case of staying the same. You're supposed to do something about it. So what's going on here? Who are you fighting? What do you mean? I said, well, this is the profile of a general in Iraq. You're at war. This bloody company said, and suddenly he just opened up, banged the table. Everybody in this 500-person company was trying to screw the company, and he was the only one that was actually saving it. He was saving the company by being it. And we got talking. So you're the only one, right? So all these 500 people are all wasters, and you're the only blah, blah, blah. The coaching got him through. This man totally changed. He suddenly realised that, in fact, his self-image and his view of himself was wrong, and he needed to change. And through coaching, he actually changed. And this is what's happening in the civil service. Senior managers are going through serious coaching discussions about what they're doing, how they're doing it, and whether it's actually working. So that's pretty positive, I think. There are town hall consultations happening. Deeper are going down meeting civil servants, because I think over 50% of the civil service now is outside of Dublin. So they're meeting people and talking about the staff survey. Departments are doing that as well, going out, talking to people. And they're also, at the moment, preparing strategic statements. And they're taking account of what happened, what they found in the engagement surveys. And they're actually meeting staff and consulting staff about the future. So they're dealing with that communication thing. So this engagement survey is actually already making some difference. So the action plans report good progress as to what's happening. So my own view is that there are green shoots here. Things are changing in terms of the kind of recurring challenges. The push from Deeper and the resistance of the system, I think, is still there. But I think Deeper are winning hands down. They're providing that framework to make the system actually operate. People management is not a strength, but it's being worked on. And this is an issue too. You'll find it in the health service as well. Very similar findings in the health service about how people are managed. And there's an issue. My daughter's doing a master's in Trinity. She's in the health service, and she was getting a talk about dealing with performance. And you know, they had this bell curve. 20% of people are your top performers. Then you got 40% who are good, and you got 20% who are poor. And the person was arguing, you got to deal with this 40%. You can't be spending all your time on poor performance. This 40% is really important, and this other 20%. And she's thinking to herself, what if your boss is in this lower 20%? And she says, I better not say anything about that, because some senior managers in the place that were from her organisation. So she mentioned it over coffee, and everybody she said it to said, you're dead right, the boss is the problem. So there is some issue about leadership, and okay, that's an anecdote, but I think there's evidence to show it as well. That,
5 minutes,
5 minutes, okay. Indications of low innovation, that's what the survey shows. Improvements needed in consultation and communication, that's happening. Strong possibility good ideas from staff are not heard, hence more communications. And then evidence suggests there are challenges for the public service as a whole. So it's not only the civil service, but the whole public service. The context, I'll run through this very quickly, but we have this rise in populism, and simply described as giving simple answers to complex problems. I mean, we could talk a lot about this. I mean, already in the UK, the High Court is the enemy of the people. There's a huge amount of things happening in Europe and in the States that are worrying about this populism. Level of trust in the Irish system is bad. Only 32% of people trust government, 39% trust the media, 43% business, and 49% trust NGOs. New Politics is a recognition of this. And then there's a quote from a document called the People's Conversation. It talks about citizens rising. And it's a collection of views of a number of consultations that were held in 2015 with citizens about the issues we're facing. And the quote says, if we stick to business as usual, the dangers we face include social exclusion, marginalisation, economic failure, or even a breakdown in social cohesion. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Just to remind us, New Politics was supposed to be about a new Dáil, expanding the role of TDs, open government, and empowering the citizen, shifting the balance of power from the state to the citizen. Examples of this, we've had the Constitutional Assembly, Citizens' Assembly, public participation networks in local government, consultation on the legislation, open government partnership. The government's part of a 70-country group talking about open government. I'm saying, is there enough? Is there a greater role for the public service? And the People Conversation talked about a number of things that are needed in terms of citizenship and changing the way we do things. So a political system that's not detached from the concerns of citizens, reform of government, education, voice for citizens outside elections, bring back the word citizen, take account of the role in global affairs. How can we do that? And then the opportunity to be active. The key proposals they make is a permanent citizens' assembly, use of citizens' juries, public participation networks, but they're only local government. What about the central state? More decision making closer to the citizen, more deliberation of policy issues. Minister of Community, we have a Minister of Community, but do we know it? And then constitutional status for the Ombudsman. Citizens' jury, this is what this interesting assignment in Cork and Galway was about. Citizens' jury is getting people together to think about issues that are facing the government. This is happening all over the world. Melbourne, it happened about a funding issue in Melbourne, got a group of people together, and what they said about it was it took away the entrenched positions of politicians and the heavy-handedness of lobbying groups, and it allowed citizens to discuss something that was important to them and make proposals to the administration. There's a case study of this in Ireland, the pilot citizens jury in Galway County Council. I'll do this very quickly, Peter, I'm nearly there. Set up in 2013, its mandate was to develop practical proposals for public sector reform for a 2-year period with Galway County Council. Advertising in the media, 12 representative people were chosen. The jury had 20 meetings from July 2013 to 2015. The work focused on 2 questions. How can government organise itself better to help citizens? And how can citizens have a greater say in the design and delivery of public services? The interesting thing about this was that the jury decided to have public listening sessions, so they went around the county of Galway meeting people in public libraries and public areas. The jury asked to meet public servants, so they didn't really know what the public service was about, so there was a conversation with frontline public services servants about how they provide their services with the jury. So the jury was able to understand what the hell is the public service about anyway. And then they made practical proposals. The outcome of that jury was that the jury developed proposals on how public agencies can better communicate with citizens, dealing with data sharing and citizens' rights, proposals about centralisation with accessibility, using the Ombudsman's Guide to Best Practice for Public Servants. And the proposals were sent to Galway County Council, the Department of Social Protection, the Gardaí, the HSE, and Udos together, who were involved in this and who were part of the frontline people meeting with the jury. I think this is innovative, it's different, it involves public servants in a different way and gets them discussing things, and also lets the citizens know what's happening. What we learned about how this should be done. Well, people want to be involved. You need to be skilled to do this sort of stuff. Experts can be invited to give deliberations, to help the jury deliberate on issues. You need to be clear about what you're looking for. Public sector organisations need to champion it, so they need to answer it rather than it be foisted on them. So there needs to be somebody doing something about it. Sorry, I've just gone too far there. The public involved in this now understand the difficulties of public sector reform, and then obviously there needs to be some output. In fact, there's a proposal with the government subcommittee at the moment to use this type of approach on climate change, to get a number of juries around the country to actually work with the public service on what we need to do to meet our commitments under climate change. I think it's a super innovative type of approach. And my conclusions. New politics provide an opportunity for the public sector as a whole, including the semi-state sector, to play a greater role in empowering citizens. I think this is where it's at. And the concept of countrywide citizens' juries to deliberate and keep policies like climate change, an ageing population, countering the rise in populism, improving public services, improving health services, should be given serious consideration. Getting citizens involved and leaving the lobbying and the politicians out. And then such initiatives could contribute to a more effective and innovative public service. Thank you very much.
That's great, Declan.
Thank you.